Good morning, everyone. Thank you. As the previous speakers did, I'm from Australia as well, and in Australia we acknowledge the country where we meet on. And while I'm not in Australia, I've done my research on Australian grounds, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners, past and present, of the lands where the studies were all undertaken. But I also want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to be a guest here on this land in Bali, and to acknowledge the Balinese people as the caretakers of the island's cultural and spiritual traditions that make the time that we have here so special. And where is there a better place to talk about joy than here? Of course, I also would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak today. A little bit about me, further to what was just said. I research transdisciplinary learning processes and collaboration for sustainability transitions. That's my field. But I also look and undertake interdisciplinary educational research in the area of education for sustainable development. I mostly teach in postgraduate courses, and in this conversation, in this talk, while I come from a sustainability perspective, where eco-anxiety among my students is really found, it's closely connected, eco-anxiety, with a lot of difficult emotions, and we're talking there about guilt, grief, anger, despair, etc. What I'm about to say, though, doesn't only apply to sustainable development education. It applies to a whole range of educational challenges. And for students that will work soon in a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I don't know if you're familiar with the VUCA concept, but that is what VUCA means. So before we step into today's ideas, I'd like to ground us with a brief reflection. Maybe one that helps us the terrain we each inhabited as educators in this room. So, I have a question for you. How many of you have had moments this year where teaching felt steady, where you felt confident, grounded, and really in your rhythm? So I see a couple of hands going up. Thank you. How many of you have found yourself stretched, navigating complexity, uncertainty, or the emotional weight of what you teach? A couple of more hands are going up. Thank you. And how many of you, and it doesn't matter in which field you are, have had moments, even briefly, where the workload or emotional load tipped towards overwhelm, where it just felt maybe sometimes too much to hold it alone? Oh, a couple of double hands. Thank you. Thank you. What you've just revealed captures something essential, that even in this room, the emotional landscape of teaching spans comfort, stretch, and moments that edge towards overwhelm. And it's from that shared reality that I want to begin. So, let me begin with a story. And I would like to say that this story is completely embedded in research. Some years ago, a colleague, let's call her Sam, was teaching a sustainability unit. It was week 4. The moment this semester when ideas stop being abstract and begin to feel personal. The class had just spent 2 hours exploring socio-ecological systems. Systems that are not simple, not linear, where feedback loops disrupt certainty, and no single perspective ever has the answer. Students packed their bags slowly. carrying that familiar mix of curiosity and unease that arrives when ideas suddenly become real. One student lingered behind. They hesitated, searching for language that felt almost too vulnerable for academic places. And they finally said, "I don't know how to keep caring about this without falling apart." This wasn't actually confusion about the content. It wasn't confusion about assignment rubric, but it was about the emotional cost of knowing, really knowing the realities of what they were studying. And in that moment, Sam realized something I've heard quite often in my research, that nothing in her training had prepared her for this part of teaching. Her disciplinary training taught her how to analyze systems. Her teaching preparation taught her how to design learning outcomes. Her institution taught her how to manage course logistics, but nothing, absolutely nothing had prepared her to support a student facing emotional disorientation or the comfort that emerges in transformative learning. And during this conference, I've already heard a lot of people talking about transformative learning. And when we go into the theory of transformative learning, we talk about those disorienting dilemmas, those difficult spaces we need to go before we see new worldviews, etc. So, Sam had never been thought about emotional holding or walking along students in the early stages of emotional processing. You know, and there we talk about the layered burden of absorbing, for example, the data science, the climate science, imagining future scenarios, and grappling with solutions that don't exist, and feeling the quiet fear about what all of this means for the future kids. And yet, this type of work has quietly become part of the work of many educators. Across discipline, educators now describe students seeking certainty when there isn't any. They oscillate between hope and ambivalence or experience emotional restlessness when confronted with VUCA realities. Students are not struggling with information, students are struggling with this emotional load. And which is why research increasingly argues that social-emotional competencies, coping, emotional regulation, reflective awareness, uncertainty tolerance must become explicit learning outcomes. They need the inner capacities to stay engaged with those value-laden problems without burning out. And whether we like it or not, the age of people burning out or feeling overwhelmed, especially in certain professions, like sustainability professions, educators, and in the health sector, is getting younger and younger. And that brings me to the foundational idea beneath this keynote. Any hope of achieving sustainable futures requires people who can face distress, uncertainty, and complexity. And that work begins in our classrooms. Now you may be thinking, do I really need to deal with a student overwhelm? And I'm not really here to talk about the individual overwhelm or the psychological individual needs that people have because of life. I'm really talking about what comes with the difficult things that we do. So what Sam experienced illuminates something rarely spoken but widely felt. There is hidden curriculum in higher education of those who engage with sustainability and sustainable development. You know, a curriculum that lives in the emotional work educators do without recognition. In one of our studies, educators consistently reported that students report to those conditions and they have a need for reassurance. But the educators admitted they had received no formal training to do so. They don't actually really know what to do in helping students cope. They said in our study that they were relying on intuition, on accumulated experience. Some said, I freeze, I don't do anything. And someone said, oh yeah, I provide a bit of pastoral care. So the hidden curriculum isn't a list of competencies in the handbook. It's the unspoken emotional labor of educators that try to normalize struggle, that at times model vulnerability, that make complexity feel survivable, and create safety without false certainty. And without this very deep hidden curriculum, this deep learning, the kind that could touch identity, values and worldview, the deep learning simply cannot take place. So, this emotional reality for dealing with complex problems in a VUCA world is present for both students and educators. And Robertson calls this the mirror dilemma. Educators hold a gap between institutional expectations, and we talk about content, assessment, compliance, and the deeper transformation they believe is needed. Thinking about critical thinking, systemic awareness, transformative action. Students also hold a gap between the world as it is. You know, at the moment, it's very turbulent, inequitable, precarious, and the world they long for is a lot more just. Both feel the tensions between values and constraints. Both feel the discomfort of ambiguity. Both feel the responsibility without full control. And there is a lot about in literature that says we need to build resilience. But we can't build, we cannot build resilience in students while ignoring the emotional reality of educators. So let's get back to Sam. This is what Sam also realized. After the conversation in week 4, Sam had found emerging research literature signaling the need for educators to possess an awareness of the role of emotions in education for sustainable development. And beyond the competencies that are very clearly spelled out in literature on education for sustainable development, it started more and more engaging at the moment with social-emotional competencies. You know, what she found when she was reading about this is that those social-emotional competencies can assist educators and their students in effective teaching with adaptability and resilience in the face of a range of challenges. And then Sam began experimenting, reflecting and adjusting her teaching. She made small but quite subtle changes grounded in sustainability pedagogy. First of all, she made space for shared humanity through reflective practice and emotional recognition. Instead of diving straight back into content the following week, Sam opened with a brief reflective activity. Students could name their responses to VUCA conditions or to wicked problems that I think many of you will be familiar with. And she didn't ask here for deep personal disclosure. She wasn't qualified for that. But what she did, she modeled emotional recognition and normalization. And Fern Wixon et al. In a very recent publication called this, that this simple gesture is called turning toward difficult emotions. And it's not fixing them, just acknowledging that they exist and part of the learning. What Sam actually found is that students laughed, they relaxed. Some admitted confusion, some were quite scared, but some were also very excited. And the room softened, not because the problems became easier, but because the students no longer felt alone inside them. She also shifted from clarity giving to clarity creating. And she used creative embodied methods to, for example, build systems maps with objects, images and materials. And I've heard that here at the conference as well, people talking about, you know, the value of art. But it's also, it's really the working collaboratively, making things tangible that helps people in their understanding. And someone who is making new things and doing generates new or renews or maybe reinterprets old learning experiences. So within our research, students described feeling less overwhelmed, that the threshold action felt lower for taking action, and that collective meaning making replaced individual confusion. Of course, there is a lot more to those examples, but she found that they were valuable, just like the next one, where she normalized the emotional arc of learning. Sam introduced the comfort, stretch, panic framework, like I just did at the beginning. You know, students indicated where they were. You know, no explanation, no judgment, a couple of seconds, but it changed the energy in the room. And with looking at the responses, Sam gained real-time insight into the class affective landscape, which helped her how to approach the lesson. And this is what Wicks and et al. Call emotional holding, staying with discomfort long enough for it to become productive, rather than it becomes paralyzing. What she also did was she reframed discomfort as meaning. And she did that through futures thinking and values clarification. Later in the unit, she used a future building exercise. And the students, they imagined plausible but difficult futures, not necessarily ideal ones. You know, often we go in hackathons, we go straight, or, you know, in a lot of the collaborative work we do, we want solutions, but students were allowed to sit through sketching, modeling, and stepping into scenarios what felt wrong. Research reports that the insight was simple, but quite transformative in terms of transformative learning. The student said, "What feels painful here is what matters to me." And with this value servicing, we cultivate this. It's also called emotional digestion, processing difficult feelings so they can fuel motivation rather than stall it. But I think what is important, what Sam actually did, she allowed joy to re-enter the room organically. In all these practices, reflection, mapping, emotional normalization, futures thinking, joy emerged. And I'm not talking about the exuberant joy, but the quieted joy of working together, of understanding together, of holding complexity collectively, of discovering a shared purpose. This is actually the joy that sustains learners, and it's also the joy that sustains educators. I'm not talking about cultivating joy as making learning easy or cheerful. It's about making it possible so that emotionally, intellectually, and relationally, we can stay with hard things for long enough for transformations to occur. As said, none of Sam's strategies were added for fun. By taking a different approach, Sam could reframe moments of frustration into moments of creative empowerment. And when the research says when students feel safe, seen, and invited into collaborative exploration, environments naturally support positive effect, curiosity, and moments of joy. And I'm not here talking about joy as an outcome, you know, but also as a motivation and as a possibility. So, joy requires conditions, and joy also requires resilience. Joy cannot emerge if the educator is depleted. Therefore, we must remember that building resilience is not about self-sacrifice. Resilience requires rest, boundaries, and peer connection. If you put your hand up at the start, in the panic mode, maybe this is, and you indicated the workload, maybe, or the emotional load, tips you sometimes over, or nearly over, or where it felt too much to hold alone. You know, think about resilience, think about building the connections, you know, where can you share, where can you, at an emotional level, connect on the difficulties. Joy and resilience also require us as educators to engage in reflective practice. Maybe, if we're honest about it, with ourselves, we also need to engage with our underlying feelings, fear and anxieties regarding the topics we teach or research. I guess reflecting here that such practice is needed to become better educators can make some of us in that way deeply uncomfortable. I have to admit, it actually did make me uncomfortable for quite a long time. But if we want our students to thrive in a VUCA world, we may need to think about it and take it serious. And if we don't do it, who does it then? You know? Maybe there are places where there is space within programs. But if we talk complexity, complex problems, wicked problems, VUCA world, you know, we may really need to think about this element. But of course, Sam can't do it alone, and there is already so much expectation on lecturers and teachers. While individual educators can do a great deal, they cannot and should not carry the emotional and relational demands of complex problems teaching alone. Higher education institutions must recognize that the emotional dimensions of learning in VUCA context are not peripheral. And actually my university did it because my research into this was funded by the university. What could higher institutions do? Recognize emotional labor as academic labor. Educators, and I know a lot of educators feel often a lot less valued than their research peers. And many of them are actually engaging in emotional recognition, holding and processing, but often without the time, often without the training or without any acknowledgement. And if transformative learning requires emotional turbulence, then educators facilitating it needs the recognition. We need to make space for social-emotional competences. I've already said it: reflective practice, uncertainty tolerance, coping strategies, emotional regulation, collaborative meaning making. Maybe they need to get into learning outcomes, and maybe they shouldn't be seen as optional extras. Maybe we need to provide professional development options for emotional facilitation. This includes a trauma-aware pedagogy. And we've actually started, I'm doing some research in bushfire areas. And I do the research on learning, but all the research is there needed to be trauma-informed. You know, slowly in certain places, it is coming. Maybe we need to learn better how to hold space. I recognize that this may not be for everyone or that everyone gets excited about this, but these are capabilities that are needed in numerous areas that we teach in. I think one of the biggest change I've seen is by creating structures for educator belongings. There's quite a lot of research about communities of practice for educators. But as Sam said, what helped her stay grounded was not a framework, but colleagues she could talk to after class. You know, and we can think here about reflective circles, safe professional spaces, but dedicated spaces where we as educators that teach complex problems, we can become a collective. You know, and institutions need to model resilience, and that is a difficult, who is the institution, you know, and what does it mean if we say that higher education must do this? But I would say there is a place for flexibility, empathy, creating spaces for reflection, practices that sustain well-being, and I think that is what is needed is tolerance for experimentation. Often, you know, as educators, we are evaluated on what the end score of our unit model of what we teach is. You know, how does that at times facilitate experimentation? You know, resilience must not just be a burden on individuals. So, in conclusion, teaching sustainability and many other topics in the VUCA world is not merely intellectual work. Students are learning not only about complexity, but also how they can make a difference in it and how they can sustain themselves in it. Educators like Sam are not only teaching knowledge, but the courage, resilience and hope they need to stay engaged. And educators have responsibilities, and while they can't do it alone, we must think what we can do ourselves. And joy, quiet, sustaining joy must be protected, because it is the energy that helps us and our students stay with the work long enough for transformative change to take root. And if this speaks to you, maybe where to go from here. And if you haven't thought about it, maybe connect with one another. There are actually a couple of researchers in the room that are interested in this. Educators need belonging too. We often think about belonging for our students and how belonging creates influences learning. It's important for us too. Reflect honestly on the emotions this work brings up. Protect your own energy with rest, boundaries and support. And where possible, try to create the conditions where joy can grow for you and your students.
What are we looking to?
Thank you.
And which paradigm do you generally use in higher education? Then the research questions in terms of curriculum and work readiness imperatives. Then I would come to the 4 curriculum imperatives then, which are grounded